Briar Jacques, welcome to Pivot.
Thanks for
And welcome to Kokoro.
Yeah, amazing.
It's so lovely to have you here, my Pisces buddy. I have just begun an astrology course with you. Astrology is something that I've always had this yearning or pull towards since a really young age, actually. And then I was told to sign up for your course, and then it was full, and I was like, no, I really hope I get a spot. Anyways, eventually got a spot, so I'm so happy. And yeah, we're here to talk all things astrology.
Awesome. Yeah. So good.
So you said on the first day of the course to all of us, you said, just you guys being here means that you have it inside you.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, so when we're looking at something like astrology, it's an archetypal system, right? And it doesn't get understood with our scientific thinking. So we're dealing with archetypes, right? So we're outside of a rational, materialist, scientific model. So the way we normally would approach, a learning is there's something that's piqued your interest, you're curious, you go, you don't know much or you know a little bit, and then as the time goes on and you learn things, and you learn them quite cognitively, but you also learn them through the experience of the learning through the nervous system, right?
Okay.
So this is our understood, that's what we've experienced in school, we've acquired knowledge, we get quite soothed and happy when our mind can regurgitate what we're learning as we go along.
/ memorize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then utilize, apply critical thinking, all of that stuff, right? Have you noticed astrology doesn't stick to your mind?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. It's also the way that you're teaching it, which I've noticed is very much through feeling.
Yeah.
Versus, here are some bullet points about a Pisces, here are some bullet points about a Leo, so you're teaching it in a very unique way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't stick.
No.
I feel what I'm gaining is that if I'm around some Libras, I'm getting an essence for those people, and you're allowing me to take that to the next level. But it's interesting. I'm a bit confused.
It is confusing.
Yeah.
So we're taking a look at reality through an archetypal lens, which is not something we've been really exposed much to. But what's essentially happening, what I meant by if you're drawn to it, it's already in you, is that we're so much more than we know, and life is so much more than we think it is, and that there are things we can't explain everywhere, right? And what I've noticed is people who are drawn to astrology, they crave a few things. They crave a re-enchantment of their life. Yeah. We live inside a disenchanted worldview, right? Overly rationalist, overly materialist, right? It's not enough soul. So they're craving something like that. They're craving
like a knowing.
Yep, like an interest, coming back into seeing, like when you're around Libra energy, what does that even mean? Like it's something you sense and perceive that connects you to something more than what we can see going on.
Yeah.
So that brings a certain amount of magic back into one's life. But as the way I'm approaching it really is astrology as healing modality, not astrology as classification system. Yes. And a lot of people are looking at it as a classification system. What is a Libra bullet points? Like, you can get this off the internet. It doesn't really mean terribly much because it's just some ideas. Let's just divide the world into 12 teams. And that's not what it is. So there's a lot of...
As you said, actually, in the course, you were saying that, your sun sign is Pisces, my sun sign is Pisces. Yeah. Being reduced to a Pisces... it's reducing, or what's the word, reductive? So you're squeezing yourself into this small little category, which, yes, of course, I can relate to certain things of Pisces, but you're not looking at the other 11 parts of the chart. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the natal chart is like a mandala, right? So it has all of these sign energies arranged in a particular way for you, right? And when we read a chart, we're engaging with your mandala. So it's not to try to sum you up or get it right. It's an activation. It's not information exchange. So we sit with your chart together, and I look at it because I've studied astrology, so I can speak the language. Yeah. But also I've explored these archetypes viscerally for like many years. So I look at your chart. A different astrologer will get a different something from it in the same ballpark, but
Okay.
slightly different. And then I'll ask you a question, or I'll say, tell me about da-da-da. And it might have been that you needed to be asked that. There'll be something that it kicks off in you. This is what I've mainly noticed with readings. It's not like, I'm not there to prove astrology. You know, people come, oh, wow, that was accurate, therefore good. It was like, oh, wow, I felt something being put into words that I'd felt for many years, and that leads them down the rabbit hole of showing up a little differently.
Yeah.
So as a therapist, it's an epic tool, right? But not one that many are trained anymore, because it's thousands of years.
So what are your sort of qualifications or your profession? So other than an astrologer, what are you?
Right, okay, so first of all, the first thing I studied ever was astrology from 11 years old. I was just fascinated with it.
Okay.
And then in my 20s, I did my formal certifications in that study in Australia. And then I went, and I was always obsessed with yoga, so I became a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. So this was my base. And then into my early 30s, I had always really liked psychology. So I went back to university for a decade and did all my psychology. So I'm qualified as a counselling psychologist. And so I blend all three modalities. As a psychologist, I'm in the behavioural end of the pool, so contextual behavioural end. So I'm looking at how do we live a values-driven life, what are the processes of change, how do we stay flexible. But astrology was something I kept kind of in the back cupboard because it's so misunderstood.
Yeah.
And it can, I guess when you're coming up a bit younger, you're afraid of it damaging your credibility, which I think is valid. But I just got to the point where I'm like, no, it's too good a tool. Like, I don't use it with everyone. Only people who are really, their ego is able to sort of get there.
So on that note, why do you find astrology such an important tool?
Because it gets you asking really good questions.
Okay.
And it's like a shortcut into some depth and some resonance for people where they get that feeling. And that's what so therapy works because it's an experience. It doesn't work because the person didn't know a thing and they come in and now they know a thing. You can get that knowledge on the internet, from a book. You know, we're plenty connected enough in that way.
Yeah.
But when you do good therapy, it's because there's a full body experience of being seen, being held, being validated, but then being activated in a certain way. So astrology just dials up the chance of that happening. But only, when I joked before about only if the ego's okay, there are certain people whose mind, which I use mind and ego interchangeably, it's not appropriate because you won't get past that ego, that they've just decided, no.
What's the ego saying to people like that?
This is untrue, it doesn't exist, it's ridiculous. They're overly influenced by thinking it's 12 teams, the newspaper, predictive, good, bad, scary. A lot of people get afraid of it. They think it's like fortune telling or something, which is not. So they're too far from being able to get with it.
Yeah.
But people who are open to the more esoteric arts, right? This is thousands of years old, who have experienced things like we were talking about before, like quantum healing or Reiki or yoga therapy, and they know there's more going on in the human experience than just our cognitive processes. Then when I use it with them, it's like we get that experience more potently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So there are people more inclined to receive and handle astrology in a better way than others.
Yeah, like it's not...
It's a divider. It's a room divider.
Yeah, because of the stories about it. Like, often when you can expose somebody to what it really is, they're more open to it than they thought they were.
It's a little bit like hypnotherapy, actually.
Yeah.
Because hypnotherapy has a bit of a bad rep because of it scares people.
Yes.
Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to click my fingers and you're going to cluck like a chicken. It has the stage hypnosis rep, which isn't obviously not hypnotherapy at all, but it is also a room divider, and it takes, I mean, I've had like hundreds of people send me WhatsApps or calls to like just understand that it's not scary. And I'm like, no, it's not a scary thing. And 50 of them never even went through and did a session, but it's crazy.
Yeah, look, but we seek control, right?
Yeah.
I always wanted to put above the door of our centre, I wanted to put a sign, you know, for everyone walking in, whether they be clients, staff, Deliveroo drivers, whatever. In case you're wondering, the problem is control.
Yeah.
You know, we seek control in an uncontrollable experience called a human life, and that's fundamentally anxiety producing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you've got a modality where that's going to require more surrender, but
the effectiveness of hypnotherapy is based on how much you're able to let go.
That's it.
So it's up to you.
But don't you think the effectiveness, like the growth of your life, is determined by that?
Definitely. Like yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So what are important aspects of astrology that you would want people to know, to maybe encourage them to look into their full birth chart, or, you know, kind of go to the next step of astrology versus just reading about their sun sign in a newspaper or a magazine?
Yeah. Well, reading about your sun sign doesn't really work for some technical reasons I won't go into, but basically the sun in the chart represents a direction. Like the sun itself, right? It's a light source and it radiates.
Yeah.
So it is representative. When we're looking at your astrological chart, we're thinking mythopoetically. We're not thinking rationally, scientifically. Okay, so logically, it's mythos, not logos, right? So when you think about the sun, it describes the direction, the mission, the quest, what you want to be able to represent. So for you, Pisces, right? You are seeking to live a life that's artistic, that's inspired, that's spiritually connected, that is
all true.
About kindness and compassion and service and surrender and having this sort of magical experience of life. So that's where you're going. That's what you... Now, how you go there is better described by the moon placement in the chart, because that's the feelings, the body, the daily habits, the way you look after yourself, your needs, etc. So each of the...
I like that. So how you get there is more the moon.
And the style with which you will automatically do that in is the rising. Okay, so they're your big three. But then you've got the other planetary archetypes, and they all represent a different part of your functioning. And then they're all talking to each other. So when you read for a chart, you can very quickly get into quite a rich and depth discussion of that person's functioning. But you've got to be prepared.
Well, you can.
Well, yeah, but you can soon.
We're getting there.
You can soon too, but you've got to be prepared to make that stretch to a more mythological lens of looking at the self, not drilling into, you know, like we like to label things. We're good at that. Like we like you said, reductive. We like to reduce ourselves to this type of person or this type, and in mental health, this type of pathology. You know, we've kind of botanized human suffering very effectively. Yeah. We need to go beyond that. So yeah, it's a whole other discussion.
Whew. Like, you know, when your mind's just blown or like still processing. It's good because I can watch it back and then be like, oh yes, this is what we were talking about. Okay, let me talk about your pivot.
Okay.
I want to know about your pivot, and tell me about a pivot that you've gone through in your life that got you to this point of where you're at today, and that you can say this moment was a very, I would say, valuable moment, good or bad.
Yeah, okay. So Saturn return. So every person has what's called a Saturn return.
I remember mine.
Yep, you do. Yeah, 29 to 31 roughly. And this is where Saturn makes one full revolution of the chart, comes back to its what we call natal position. And the themes are usually hardship, overcoming adversity, challenge, loneliness, what used to work no longer works. Yeah. You are just sort of left without a rug under your feet. It's a time where you're stepping into adulting, really, for the first proper time. So people will do big things. They'll get married, they'll get divorced, have a kid,
I got married.
Change. You got married, yeah. So it's like this, it's this...
life-changing...
huge.
Relationships, would you say? Or connections to people in some way?
Where in your chart.
Oh, I see, okay.
So yeah, if it's we look at that and we can tell by house and placement, like what the themes of your Saturn return were going to be. So mine was, I had, you know, done bits and pieces. I'd run an organic market in Australia. Was teaching, I was doing some astrology work. But I was sort of buffling around, right? No, I hadn't run the market yet. This is post-Saturn return. Wrong. I'd been buffling around, right, wondering what I was going to do with a career. I'd been to university, I'd left university, I'd travelled a lot, and hit this real place of, I have no idea what to do with my life. And it was just
Scary.
very scary, very empty, very lonely, right? And there's a real validity in allowing a process like that, and that's what we usually find out at Saturn return. You have to go inside for your resources. And then I ended up applying to, I'd always loved yoga, so I ended up applying to a yoga teacher training just out of curiosity. And that was a year and a half, every week, a full day, and every second weekend up, you know, with these teachers. And it literally was that. Yeah, I had been headed more in this, I don't know, more of a direction that was a bit more mainstream, I guess, a bit more like I had to maybe find a corporate job or do something that was never going to suit me.
Yeah.
And it just took me into this world that led me to therapy. And then I had to find a way to fund it. And so I went to massage therapy school to learn to be a massage therapist. And then I worked in a holistic health center doing massage therapy to fund my yoga teacher training. So it was the starting point of being a therapist, because when you're a therapist, you can't be afraid of getting close and personal with people and putting your hands on people every day. I see it now in retrospect. Was that what I needed?
The initiation into
and everything
being a
is what I
therapist.
need. Everything is what I needed, which is we all do that, right? We look back at our lives and we see what we needed, came when we needed it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was a massive pivot, and yeah, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't have done that. It was epic.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when did you move to Dubai?
10 years ago. Yeah,
Oh, not so long.
Yeah. So I was 6 years in Vietnam before that, and I worked in a hospital in Vietnam, and then came here 10 years ago.
In a hospital in Vietnam.
Working as a therapist, psychologist. Yeah.
And why Vietnam?
It was kind of like, why not? We wanted to leave Australia.
That's such a Pisces thing.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's such a Pisces thing. I feel like I could never do that though because of the other, I don't know. It's like, oh, I really want to, but it's not going to happen. You know?
Yeah, well, we knew we wanted to go overseas. Our son was 3. We had some options on the table. My husband's a librarian, so we got offered a few places in a few different countries.
A librarian? I don't even think I've met anyone who's a librarian other than my school librarian.
It's fairly old school, right?
Wow.
Yeah, no, he's a librarian. And so we had a few choices, and I don't know, I'd always felt drawn to Vietnam. And it is a very cool place.
Yeah.
So we went there, and it was really pivotal. And then from there, I need an English-speaking population to work with, because I can't, unfortunately, work in the other languages.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd come to Dubai, and it really is the middle place of the world. So yeah.
It is, definitely. Okay, so have you ever had any particularly memorable experience with a client or reading someone's chart or something that really stuck out in your mind? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I mean, there have been many that sort of where you'll hit on something that you're able to put into words. It's very powerful when you can wrap language around something where the person feels like it's being really understood, you know, and therapy seeks to do that all the time. And so, yeah, that happens more often if I'm using a chart, because it just gives me this, it's like looking in the undies drawer, you know, like I'm able to kind of spot some things pretty quickly on to ask about.
Yes.
That just open up. So it's this activation tool. So yeah, that happens all the time in readings. Where I'm noticing real like goosebump shifts is in the group classes.
Oh.
Because I think astrology lends
Lucky
itself.
me.
Yeah, well,
I'm there.
I think astrology lends itself very well to a group therapy experience. Because it's people learning about themselves, but also looking at each other and watching the archetypes play out in language and in physical appearance and in different aspects of relating. And I think that creates an excitement, but it also creates that connection to there's more going on than we think there's going on.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is really helpful. Yeah.
Well, what's next for you?
What's next? So more classes.
More group.
Yep, more groups. Started running retreats. So taking people away and immersing, not just in astrology, but in therapeutic processes, yoga therapy, that sort of stuff. And I'm working on a book about making your moon happy.
Oh, so the book, you had shown us a book at the end of your book.
So that's my diary. Oh, that's just my fun diary.
Well, I tried to buy it, and it was sitting there, but they hadn't done the pricing or something for it yet. So I was like, is there still some left?
Yeah, so Kiani, so what I do every year is I make a year diary, and all adjusted for the UAE. So it's just a fun thing I do. And in there every month I've got the lunations, so the full and new moons, the themes of the month astrologically, the eclipses if there are any, and the void of course moons, which is times where you shouldn't really start something.
Oh.
And then I've written about each archetype, and then there's a bunch of empty pages in there for you to write
Journal.
your own. So it's a journal / astrology.
Yeah, I loved it. Like just the look of it as well. You just reminded me. Actually, I guess on Monday I can
Fun. Yeah.
pick one up.
Yeah, I have a bunch. Yeah.
I have one last question.
Okay.
And it's about how Pluto has been in Capricorn for the last 15 years.
Yep.
And now it's moved into Aquarius.
Yeah, everyone's talking about this.
It's all over Instagram, and like it's getting a lot of hype.
Yep.
So would you be able to just explain that a little bit for listeners so they can have a bit more of an understanding of what that means? Because that sounds like Chinese to a lot of people.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we're thinking outside of our logical understanding of, we're in metaphorical space, but Pluto represents transformation. Okay, so transformative experiences coming along that revolutionize, that change things completely. Okay, so it takes 248 years to go around the chart, right? So it spends a long time in each sign.
Yeah.
So we're just coming out of 15 years of it in Capricorn.
15 years of Pluto in Capricorn.
Mm-hmm. So as an archetype, Capricorn is about structures. Mm-hmm. It's about the way we govern ourselves, the way our systems of finance are set up and established and maintained. It's the rules of society, all of that stuff. So Pluto has been bringing sort of transformative experiences to that. When it first ingressed in 2008, we had the collapse of the financial banking.
The recession, yeah.
Yeah. So Pluto's now gone to Aquarius, which it's popped in a couple of times, but 2 days ago it went for good for 21 years. What we saw when it first popped in, which it hadn't been there for 240 years, and we saw AI just like exploded, because Aquarius as an archetype is about aggressive thinking, technology, communities, the way we organize society, the way we do collectives, futuristic thinking, just out of the boxness, right? So the place of transformation has now become more of this. So I think people are going to be rethinking how they human, rethinking how we human together. Like we were just talking about, like people crave kind of more communal living or using technology to become more sane. I mean, we're not very sane right now. I always think if aliens visited Earth, they'd be like, what the who now? Like,
what did you do?
What are you doing? So hopefully, we're going to get better, more fairer systems of being together as a humanity, and we'll use technology to serve that.
Ideally.
The shadow is that we become overly mechanistic, overly, too clever for our own good.
And disconnected as a population of actual human beings. Because we are not technology.
No.
And we are not robots.
No. So we have to stay. So when we look at the sign archetypes, you look at them as 6 pairs. So to keep the Aquarius archetype healthy, you've got to look to Leo. It's opposite.
Yeah.
And that means connection with the heart. So we've got to stay embodied in our creative expression, our heart-centeredness, to keep that in check. Otherwise it becomes too cerebral, too clever for its own good. So it's just sort of that's a very basic treatment on Pluto and Aquarius, but basically those are the themes. So people are going to be experiencing a shift. Yeah.
And are there signs that will be experiencing this shift more than others?
Yeah, like depending on your chart, that's going to come in contact something or not, right? So it'll be for everybody the themes of what we call that house.
Yeah.
That'll be your place of transformation. But if it comes along, for example, and lands on your ascendant, that's going to be a whole story. That's going to be a bit different than if it's not actually contacting there, or what we call the angles. So yeah, we can, I mean, there's a lot of chat on the social media about Capricorn was not great for Capricorns, Librans, Aries,
Exactly.
and Cancers, because they're the what we call the cardinal signs. But it would depend by degree. It would depend on a few things. Generally speaking,
So that's quite vague. Just to say that is quite
there is
vague.
a lot of vague stuff that gets passed around, and then unfortunately people measure how much they might be able to engage with or use astrology based on this really vague stuff. So it's like, oh no, it's like saying, I know what music is. It's advertising jingles. That's music.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, technically, but there's a lot more.
Yeah. Goes a little deeper.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, amazing, Briar. This was great. I feel like we got a nice kick of astrology this morning.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Oh. Well, it's good we're ending.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for coming. And I can't wait to finish the course. And is there a level 2?
There will be.
Oh,
yeah,
excellent.
Next year. About March next year, there'll be a level 2.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I need a seat. Just letting you know. Thank you so much. So welcome to Pivot.
Great.